together rather than last week when we attended the EBC and we broke down into roundtables. Tonight we're just going to speak together, and we are very fortunate to be joined by our elected representatives and several members of city staff. So we'll be having those conversations with them.
I'll start off. Terry Cunningham. I'm Mayor Bozeman. I've been a Bozeman resident for I think 26 years. My wife grew up in Helena and always wanted to come back to Montana, and we were able to do that 26 years ago. I'm really glad that we have the opportunity to meet with neighborhood associations as we go through the first phase of the UDC. A 500-page document that essentially the question that we are asking and have been asking throughout this entire first phase, we're trying to be very deliberate and try to have as many touch points as we can with folks, is what should we focus on? What are the areas of the UDC that we should be focusing on? Because as you can imagine with a 500-page document, there's a lot of detail in there. So we want to really dig in on a sort of deep basis on those areas that folks say, here's what I want to learn more about, understand, have my input into, and give specific feedback to the commission. So I just got a couple of questions, if you don't mind.
Yep.
How many folks have been in Bozeman for more than 10 years? Gotcha. How many have lived in your home for more than 10 years? Currently. How many renters do we have? Okay. And I guess that's the only sort of questions I have. And I get to turn it over to my buddy Joey Morrison.
Hi everybody, I'm your Deputy Mayor, Joey Morrison, sworn in a little over a year ago. On a day, I'm not keeping track. Yeah, really excited to be here. I know some of you and have met some of you beforehand. And Patty, you and I feel like we got really close in our journey of trying to navigate this gigantic building. Consistently bewildering to me. I've had a few gigs in town where I have to come in here, and it terrifies me every time coming from Miles City, from the high school that didn't even have a cafeteria, let alone multiple cafeterias. But really excited to be here. I don't have much to add to the mayor's remarks about the phase of the UDC process that we're in, but this has been one of my favorite parts of this job, is getting to work with community groups and neighborhood associations. And I get to serve as the commission liaison to the Neighborhood Council, which is one of my favorite roles I get to hold. And I'm really excited to be here and share some shared evening with all of you. You want to go through the hall?
Sure, yeah, why don't you guys introduce yourselves as well?
My name is Chris Saunders. I'm the Community Development Manager for the city. A lot of long-range planning and co-development. I've been with the city planning office for 29 years.
Hi, I'm Sarah Rosenberg. I am a planner and a circulation officer for the city of Bozeman. Also in the department. Been there since 2017.
Everyone, I'm Chuck. I am the interim city manager. Been in this position for exactly a year now. And been with the city of Bozeman working for the last 4 years. This place, and I love the fact that we get to meet together in smaller groups as neighborhoods. We get to have some face time with your commissioners, your mayor, your deputy mayor, and our staff. So if there's technical questions that happen here tonight, we have Sarah and Chris here. If there's political questions, we have the mayor and deputy mayor. And if there's like really easy questions, like working in restaurants,
Awesome. All right. We are really fortunate to have these guys join us tonight. Particularly Sarah, we're really glad you're here. We have question number 3 on the agenda. Wonderful to have your input. So, anyway, first page rules. Only one person speaks at a time. If you disagree, do it respectfully. Be creative and think out of the box. Brainstorm how it can be done, not why it can't be done, and keep participating. So, business. So I sent you all the bylaws, I think by the 12th, and those are in here. The only thing amended is 2 cross-outs that flexibility is going to allow us to hold our annual meeting whenever we want. So, as the chair, I think I am not allowed to make a motion, so if anybody is willing to make a motion to amend, adopt the bylaws as amended.
I'll make a motion to adopt the bylaws as amended.
That's it. Thanks. All in favor say aye. All object? Okay. Bylaws amended. All right. Steering committee elections, Patrick was not able to make it this meeting, he had a work meeting, for consultation. So, but he is willing to stand for treasurer unless somebody else would like to hold that role. Anybody who's to coach. Basically, you manage finances for block party. And we're gonna do our fundraising ahead of the block party this time. So, okay, I'm willing to stand again for the steering committee, and Allison Todd, our current secretary, has said she's willing to stand again. We have room for 2 more individuals to join the steering committee if anybody's interested. And then there's another motion down there, if somebody wants to do.
I move to elect Allison Sweeney, Allison Todd, Patrick Ross to the steering committee for the Jandt Neighborhood Association.
All in favor? All opposed? Okay. And then the steering committee, the way our bylaws are written, our steering committee decides who is assigned to what role. So Allison and Patrick and I are willing to continue in our existing roles. Juliet did call in from Costa Rica to let me know that if we're all in favor, she's willing to be the alternate to the Neighborhood Council when I can't make it. Okay, neighborhood business, thank you. Yes, thank you, Lex. All right, so the way this is gonna go, I'll do like a short little talk about some of these visual aids, and then we're gonna go through these questions and give these guys our feedback on the draft UBC, and then talk about kind of the future of our neighborhood and what options might be open to us and what we could potentially do moving forward. So this page here has the zoning for our neighborhood. So you guys have that open while we're talking about stuff. So one of the differences between the current draft and the existing code is the existing code includes floor area ratio. Floor area ratio is a way to manage the mass and scale of a building. The new proposed UBC does not have that. So some cities are adopting, like Portland, this is information from Portland. They have adopted floor area ratios that limit the size of the home. And then if you're gonna have a duplex, you get a little bit more floor area ratio, and then a triplex a little bit more. So it serves kind of 2 functions. It can help prevent the demolition of smaller, older homes, because if you're not allowed to build a mansion, you might not tear down the little one. And then it just prevents the huge mansions.
Is that single family or not, or multiple?
So,
Or are you thinking like a mansion that has a couple of apartments?
so right now, so take our neighborhood right now, okay? So most of our parcels are between 6,000 and 7,000 square feet. So say 6,000 square feet. If you're in R2, which will become RA, the floor area ratio there is 0.75. So you multiply that by your lot, at 6,000 square feet, you can have a 4,500 square foot house for one house. There's no mandate that it is more units, right? You can put 4 units in there, right? But there's no mandate that you do it. So in R2, like, do you know Sobo, the development just south of Sobo is these 2 big, tall, milk carton looking things? Those are huge duplexes, and they're in R2. So that could very
It's a
easily.
really small footprint that goes up high.
Small footprint, I mean, yeah, you can, your square footage can be broken up, you know, as long as you fit in right in it. So, anyway, by having a lower floor area ratio, we can prevent, that's the problem with the floor area ratio in R2 right now, is that it's too generous, not requiring multiple units, right? So anyway, floor area ratios can be really good. They're problematic right now, but we should do some better floor area ratios. And then in R3, the floor area ratio is 1 to 1. So, yeah. I mean, you have setbacks and all the other parts of the code, right? But like, it's very generous. Our development code is really generous.
Yeah, very good.
Yeah. Okay. So this is another thing. Unfortunately, our neighborhood is not getting clobbered with these buildings yet. But you're aware of Midtown is getting a lot of these. This is like investor product. It's a financial product. It just happens to be housing as well. But when Professor Condon was here earlier last June, he suggested multiple times that we limit parcel assembly as a way to, you know, make smaller, more interesting, granular cities with, you know, local developers doing smaller projects rather than this big massive stuff.
So parcel assembly is where you can buy like 3 houses and knock them all down and then have 3 lots together?
Yep, you combine the lots. Yeah. So like the proposed Guthrie, that was actually 3 lots. Yeah. Next to the co-op. I know that cute little duplex. So, yeah. Anyway, this is, now, I was asked to make sure that you all know this. These visual aids were made by the BBC, by me. These are not city visual aids, so these are made by me. But this information is on the city website, okay? So we're told one thing we need to address in our UDC update is to allow for more variety of housing in existing neighborhoods. We have to be able to have duplexes, triplex, what they call missing middle, which is like house size buildings but have multiple units in them. And this map shows the different types of housing. So this dark green is multifamily, the yellow is single family, purple is mobile home parks, and then the pinkish blue is duplex triplex. So you can see the best diversity of housing is actually in the core.
But, okay, I can see where I live and almost every house besides 3 houses on my street all the way to Koch are all duplexes.
I know,
So
so
that's
I
not
have,
reflected in
I know,
the
it's not super
I mean, it's super
updated.
awesome, colorful, but wait, there could be more.
There's a lot more. So
There's a lot
actually,
more.
there's a little printout over here of our neighborhood specifically.
Okay, okay.
And the parcels you know before you leave, please draw.
Okay,
in
I will.
there. Yep, because I've updated a bunch already. Because yeah, our neighborhood.
Yes, every
Right,
other house is a
we
duplex,
have
right?
heritage condos, we have some multifamily stuff, like along here we have a mobile home park, but then a lot of what was traditionally single-family homes are already
The
duplexes.
Schwalmgen is 55 and above, all duplexes. I mean,
Well, I think they're townhouse, right? They're attached.
they're yes,
Yeah.
yes. They're,
Right?
they're twin homes.
Twin homes. Yeah, so these 2 ladies are from Schwalm.
Oh yeah, that's awesome. It's right close to my house.
Helen
Yeah.
and Elaine.
That's,
Okay.
I love Schwalmgen. And no one can
Me
say
too.
Schwalmgen, right? Can anyone say Schwalmgen around?
It means place of the water.
After 10 years.
It's like
It's the front, the
It's the place of the
water.
Anyway, so the point of this, seeing this, was like a light bulb, like, oh my gosh, we have what we're trying to have, right? The core of town already has this diversity. This is what urban planners everywhere are trying to bring on the ground. So, you know, my suggestion is that maybe that we shift our perspective a little bit and move to kind of, okay, protecting this diversity, and then doing what we can to increase diversity of housing types in other areas. So walkable, little commercial nodes, it's going to be difficult because of private covenants. And I'm sure Shawamigan has covenants, and I know Heritage Condos does as well, and some of the other, the townhouses on 15 have covenants. So, but there's things we can do. So anyway, how many of you went to a UDC open house with the city? Okay. Thank you for going. So how many of you know about SB 382? Montana Land Use Planning Act. So this is the state telling municipalities of a certain size that they have to adopt 5 out of 14 provisions for housing creation. So at the UDC open houses, you got to put a star next to the ones that you like. And so the city released the data, and I have made this visual aid demonstrating these were the top 5 that people say, yes, we want to do this, we're happy about this. And these are the absolute no's. So allow multi-unit dwellings or mixed-use developments as a permitted use on all lots for office, retail, or commercial are primary use. Okay, so multi-family dwellings in those areas. Zone for higher density housing near transit stops. So streamline is our transit, and this shows their routes. That largely correlates with major arterials. So a lot of other cities are doing their affordable housing ordinances where they increase density near transit stops and along major arterials. So we could do the same thing. And then these next 3 we are already doing in Bozeman. So allows a permitted use for at least one internal or detached accessory dwelling unit, right? Half the houses in our neighborhood are duplex because of this. Provide for zoning that specifically allows or encourages development of tiny houses. Cottage housing is already allowed in every zone in Bozeman. And then allows a permitted use for at least a duplex where a single family dwelling is permitted. And I think maybe because of the internal ADU allowance, that's maybe not possible. But the UDC update, by combining RS, R1, and R2, is going to make a duplex available everywhere. So then, these are the ones Bozeman says absolutely no. Least favorite option, we don't want ugly buildings. Do not eliminate aesthetic, material, shape, size, bulk, floor area ratio, and other massing requirements for multi-unit dwellings or mixed-use developments. We're pretty done with this. Second least favorite option is to eliminate parking requirements. We have something like 1.9 cars per capita in Montana. So if we all go skiing, we all go ice climbing, and the extreme things that you guys do. And then these 3 were tied for next last place. Please don't increase building heights. Do not allow for single room occupancy. We're already actually doing that one. Do not eliminate impact fees for accessory dwelling units or developments that include multi-unit dwellings. Bozeman wants growth to pay for itself. So, these are the building heights. So this is where most of the housing, that's how tall most of the housing is in Bozeman. R1, R2. So this is existing code. Is this light turquoise color in all the different zones? This is what they're proposing increase to. Okay, and then the orange and red, those are what will happen if the affordable housing ordinance incentives are applied in that zone. Okay, so you get a lot more height in those areas. So B3 downtown, 173 foot, if they do the half the units affordable. And a lot of people, okay, so the wall plate height, anybody kind of familiar with that provision in the code? The wall plate height is where the wall of the structure comes in and you have to start tapering the roof.
Basically where the gutter is.
Yeah, where your gutter is. So the new code has a 25-foot wall plate height in RA and RB, which is going to be R2 and R3 for us. So that's most of our area. But 25 feet is really tall. If you think about the height of most of our homes, we don't have any structures over 2 stories in the Jandt neighborhood. All the multifamily buildings, 2 stories. And so this is just an example of how much bigger the building can be after the roof starts tapering, right? This one's got an entire story above where the roof starts tapering. So you guys can pass that on. And then these are some massings done by an actual architect that was concerned about this as well. So, and final visual aid, so what do we want our town to look like? Our sort of fundamental guiding document is the growth policy. So we have some growth policy references here. But this is an image of zonage transitions. So when one zone of high density or taller buildings occurs next to another zone, there's supposed to be a transition measure spelled out in our code. However, it does not apply across a street. A street is considered to be enough of a transition. But what we're experiencing on the north side is that it actually isn't. So our growth policy says to be reflective, use past experience to inform future decisions. Evaluate increasing the number of stories allowed in centers of employment and activity while also directing PEG down to the adjacent neighborhoods. So, and I will point out that downtown Bozeman is actually not the highest center of employment in our city. So that's where it's attractive to put financial investments, developments, but that's not necessarily where we should be. So here you're all familiar with this building. A lot of what I think we should address in the UDC update is the map, where the zoning districts are on the map. If you're in R4 or R3, the regulations that were in that zone decades ago are very different than they are now. And so while we're reevaluating the UDC, we need to look at the map and say, you know what, is that what we want that neighborhood zone? Do we want this replacing this? You know, so that's a conversation we need to have.
That's a good question. So are you saying like our map of Jandt is pretty colorful?
Yeah.
Are you saying, okay, this is the old zoning, let's look at this, instead of going right to the new, let's look at this and Jandt should be one, the same, so that the whole neighborhood, or what do you think? Is that clean or?
I mean, yeah, so.
That's what I want.
Right, well, so you're in R4, and you're in R3, and, you know, this is all R2. So with the update, right, in September when they released this one, they're not upzoning the RA.
Right.
So the boundaries don't change for us.
Could they? I mean, could through this process? Because,
Yes.
you know, when
I
you
mean-
get to this imaginary street, and you don't know what it is, Koch, right?
That's Koch.
Just because you cross that street, it looks exactly the same. Like, why should the upzoning change the look of part of the neighborhood and not?
Well, and that's the thing, historically, you've been R3 forever.
Yeah, but it didn't matter historically, it matters now.
It matters now, yeah, and we're seeing more development pressure now.
Way
So,
more.
yeah, like, the West Side edition, the Ware
That's on
edition,
Ware, yeah.
and the corporate here in Ware. So those three are an area of concern for me.
Yeah,
For sure.
It doesn't make sense, because then you're gonna have to zone transition. Let's say this gets developed big and this doesn't.
Well, there's no transition required between
But
RP and RA in the new code.
Oh
no
my
transition.
gosh, that's terrible.
Well, so yeah, so we have things to talk about, right? Okay, so anyway, there's things we can build into our transition regulations that will help with privacy. So window, certain styles of windows, privacy balconies, good hedges make good neighbors. You know, and stepping back a building. This is actually required in the NCOD for residential character areas, but we're not able to enforce it. I'm gonna let Sarah Rosenberg talk about that, our historic preservation officer, because we're updating the historic preservation program so that we can have something that we can enforce, hopefully, right? So anyway, that's the last of what I'm gonna talk about the visual aids. But yeah, so the boundaries, the lines on the map are not changing for us now. The areas that are gonna become RA are currently R2. The areas that are gonna become RB are currently R3. And you guys, a lot of you have done projects, so you're familiar with, you know, going through planning and stuff like that. So this page is currently the mass and scale regulations for the UDC.
Are the changes on one R2 to RA, R3 to RB, are those set in stone, or can that be, is that something that can?
I think most things are on the table right now, but
Does that make sense? So
Yeah.
R1, R2 is going to RA, R3 is going to RB. Is that set in stone, or is that something that you guys are willing to work with and change if possible, or need?
That's something that's open for discussion. There's already been some changes. There's more that will come after.
There's what?
There will be more changes that come out from after the public.
Okay.
That's why we're having
Okay.
some discussions.
Well, yeah, okay.
I guess just while we're on it, can you explain what your concern is there?
Well, because I think that, especially with Jandt, there's so many different zones in there, but the neighborhood, you don't cross Cox Street and realize I'm going into R3. The neighborhood, the half a mile by almost a mile neighborhood, all sort of looks the same, and there's these sort of imaginary boundaries that are, those are really
some of the
old.
lines feel arbitrary.
Yeah, they feel arbitrary, and they've been there for a long, long, long time, but so many things are changing that if we, if we could get a little more protection of these core neighborhoods, then, and we could change some of these boundaries, we could protect them in a really strategic way. And I don't mean protect, I mean protect them from development, not from density and diversity, because with these things, we can get density and diversity in our core neighborhood, and not have not have it look like all this tall luxury apartments. So, I mean, I just think to keep an open mind about how we could flex those zones that we have right now, 1, 2, 3, so that we can define core neighborhoods a little better and keep the colorful map.
Yeah, and so to be clear, like there's very little of our neighborhood that is going to ever look like that if we adopt this. So RC would be where that can happen, and B2M. Which B2M,
But
that's
R3 could happen too.
8 units. Yeah.
Yeah, R3 could. Yeah, anyway.
I mean, just redevelopment in general.
Yeah, redevelopment.
And that's what we're gonna talk about on question number 3. Okay, so on the agenda. I think I'm not gonna go into that too much just because of time. Yeah, I don't wanna spend all the time lecturing you guys. We need to hear from you guys. So, okay, I am gonna record answers to things up here so that we can have a record. So is there anything you guys like about the draft UDC, like generally citywide and then neighborhood specific?
Allison, can I just ask a question?
Yes. No,
During
yes.
the PDC breakout, the table that I was part of, 2 people said, hey, I've read the UDC, I have a decent understanding of what it is, either the old one or the new one, but the majority of folks says, I haven't really dug into that. So saying, I think, hey, I'm one of those, and saying what you generally like about things, what you generally don't like about things. It doesn't have to be specific, I think, maybe,
Right.
to the UDC. Is that fair?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
sure, right? I mean, yeah. And I don't know if those are good for you guys all over there.
Yeah, I didn't know if there was going to be a more formal time
Come
to
closer.
It was just like bylaw vote and then.
I know, sorry. So, yeah, I mean, ideally, we're having these questions for discussion with the people who know the code and the answers and the So I don't know if you guys want to come just even closer or whatever. But
I'll start bringing chairs around too.
yeah, awesome. Thank you.
I'm curious how many folks have taken a look at the
Yeah, that's a good question. So, how many of you have taken a moment to look at the UDC document and kind of compare?
I'm gonna go work with that.
Yeah, do you know where to find it? That's a good question. You know about Engage Bozeman?
And if you haven't, that doesn't mean
That doesn't mean.
don't share what you're feeling.
Right, don't be intimidated, don't feel bad, it's not homework.
It's not.
There's not gonna be a time.
Yes, I'm really excited you guys came. It is me too, yes, and I really want to have a conversation with you guys about that area during question three specifically, because I think maybe one of the farm houses that you're doing right now is maybe like the official jam, but you guys are kind of a little commercial node that we all love to go use, right? You're our beauty services. So yeah, you're gonna be to that. Yeah, so then you're. Yeah. We love going there. Okay. Yeah.
School's Wi-Fi.
Okay, so I can tell you guys all something that I really like about the updated UCC. I like the blank wall and window provisions. So if you look at these,
Nothing to me.
it's easier to come from the back. These are the regulations, the new proposed regulations. And in every zone, there's like a, let's see, that's our C. Yeah, there's like blank wall provisions and windows, like you can only have 10 foot of blank wall before, you have to break it up somehow. So I really like that, that's like an improvement in like design is good. Another thing I really like is that they've increased the noticing for boundary. SB 382 is going to change what types of noticing we can have, but it's gone from 200 feet to 300 feet. So that's more noticing, so I like that. SB 382. It's fighting for laws, and
I think that's a good one side.
yeah, you should know more on the so anyway, does anybody else have anything they're excited about or like, or it's okay if not? I think that's what they are now. Yeah.
Is that what they are now?
Mm-hmm.
I feel like if I lay down on the sidewalk.
I do that too, because I'm only like 5'4". How can I fit this way up? Yeah, they're 5 feet now.
Sidewalks are 5 feet wide on private property, they're 6 feet wide in parks, and along places like Main Street or 7th, those kinds of things.
But it doesn't mean that your sidewalks are 5 feet because it's just that.
Right, so there's
We have inherited the decisions made for many, many years.
yes.
I'll text you guys a picture of me laying on it. I
Okay,
promise you. My
awesome.
head off the.
Yes. Okay.
That's maybe a good thing that if things change, it would be Jeffrey's sidewalks.
Okay. So then why don't we move to what is concerning about the draft UPC? We're going to do both citywide and neighborhood specific. So, and if you don't know a lot, don't feel bad, like, you know, sharing general concerns is fine. So, yeah, Patty.
Well, I think this picture that has been used a lot for, it's very deceiving. Oh, I don't know, that might be
Yeah.
deceitful, but I mean, it's like, this is not how it's gonna look. The other lots around it are not gonna be empty. And compared to what is around it, that this has to be better to really get, this cannot be used anymore. This has to go away because it's not accurate. It's portraying something that is not true.
Right?
So
So
I take
that
offense to it.
was what an architect drew this, and actually on this side too, so this is like a massing. So they put the house in an actual streetscape. This is North Black. And, you know, we perceive images from the ground, right? We perceive buildings from the ground.
This
So
is
when
from
we,
the sky.
yeah, and I think,
There's nothing around it.
I know. So yeah, images are concerned.
Okay. Thank you. And I think your two first slides have a lot of concerns, right?
Okay, so floor area ratio.
Zone edge transitions, and this was down here, the one with the house and the second picture, the middle picture.
Yep.
Transitions.
So you're
You're
in R3. The neighborhood is emblazoned in my brain for many reasons and different maps. And the route I walked to urban school every day when I was a kid. And so yeah, RB is going to be. 40% of the lot coverage, okay, so that helps regulate mass and scale, but you can still have multiple floors to get your square footage of your building. So it can be 40% of the lot, wall plate height up to 25, and then the roof starts tapering. If someone were to build it out to the max with 5 feet of upgrade, you could be a 50-foot building. 3 stories. Yeah, so I mean, that is a really big building.
Yeah.
It's a really big building. So,
Especially because our whole neighborhood is only 2 stories, but the zoning of our neighborhood doesn't take that into account, so. Well, it maybe did in the past, but with this upgrade of the UC.
right, and it's been updated a lot, like every 5 years for 20 years.
The city adopted zoning in 1935, was replaced with wholesale 16th time, this is the 16th time, so changes the norm.
Yes, but changing, I think, both directions, the give and take, because right now I feel like we're just giving. It'd be nice to just observe some of that to the poor neighborhoods that are already providing incredible amount.
We are providing a lot of density,
Yeah, we are.
actually. Yeah, and it's deceptive because it's in original structures.
Yeah.
And we have large lots. We do. So like the older part of town, right, the lots, like most houses are on 2 lots, like they were like 25 feet wide back in the day or something.
About 25-foot set for lots, for living.
Call them what lot?
Lego.
Lego.
Lots. Okay, so you've got 1 or 2 or 10 or whatever.
Yeah.
And you aggregate them, they're very easy to transfer according to whatever your needs were. All the main streets like that.
Like,
But it's unconscious, but it goes all the way back to the higher.
Can I ask you a question
Yeah,
about this second picture here? So that's the one over, I assume, by the co-op.
yep,
And where's that divider between that little house and that big building?
that little house is in the same zone as the big building, which is why that is allowed to be built.
Because they
So
tore
that's-
down 3 houses for that, though.
Well, one was a duplex,
Oh.
and the other was an office, a dentist. So, yeah. Yeah, so a lot of, and it's more, we don't have a lot in our neighborhood. Here are three, there's a lot of houses and areas that are zoned R4 that look like our houses, right? So the map definitely.
So, yeah, just look at, and see if that would be, to encompass more, or preserve more of what we already have.
Did you read? I'm really good at writing big long reports. I'm sorry. I know not everybody has the time to read it, but I did send out the 20-page. These are potential UDC impacts. At the end of that, there's some options of maybe what we could do, and I would like to hear from Sarah. So, keep going. Okay, so many districts on that. Okay. Yeah.
And zone edge transitions and that.
Yeah, and where zone edge transitions, so there will be no transitions between RA and RB, which is the bulk of our neighborhood, right? And actually, so my house, the alleyway, so across the alleyway is a different zone from me. But yeah, no transitions. So yeah, the folks who are in R4, like over here, where Trish's house is, I think is the one next to you south, also R4. No, that's north. I think that's a fourplex. Yeah. That's probably in the R4, but then after that it's R2, so that could be where you would see like a big building like this next to a little big house, right? So.
That's why I think they need to address what kind of what do you call that thing? Alphabet soup? Just get it more uniform. So like, okay, you don't have to worry about the alley behind you getting a cute building, or when you have that sloped roof, you can go pretty high.
So there will be transitions between RC, which is currently R4, and R2. I don't know what they are off the top of my head, but they don't apply across the street, so it's still problematic. Yeah. Anybody else have kind of general concerns about?
What I brought up the other night, the concern of, all these people in small neighborhood homes increases traffic and safety, and already, on 11,
You are on 11,
it's
yeah.
College Central, and kids are zipping in now and walking, and Bozeman high school kids are also, and it's
Yeah.
intense.
Yes,
It's
intense,
you
and
have
bikes
to
and
really
all.
be careful
It's
driving.
dangerous.
And I'm
Yes.
thinking, what, Grant is waiting for people, and the roads don't accommodate that, and
Right.
the sidewalks don't accommodate that.
Okay, so infrastructure, which I don't know how to spell my winner, but okay, so sorry.
No R.
Okay. Not ready for density. Now, I have talked to Nick Ross several times about getting some traffic calming on 11th, because I know we notice it when the kids come back from semesters, vacations, whatever. They're on their phone and not looking and going 800 miles an hour. So I've had, I've had moms jogging their babies, and they'll send me an email and say, I had to wait for 25 cars to stop for me at a crosswalk. So, yes.
Okay, so I don't know if this is not so much, this is kind of easy. I think just asking the question, do we really need to increase density everywhere? Do we really need to increase density everywhere? My answer would be no, because I don't think we do. I mean, Pardon? And I would really like whoever's doing all this work, and thank you for doing all this work, please consider that it doesn't have to be across the board increase in density in all these zones. Because there's a lot of vacancies. I mean, Austin, if you look at Austin, what they did, they filled Austin, I mean, I just love Austin. There's 35,000 rentals in Austin right now. 35,000.
Wow, vacant?
Vacant,
Well,
and they're
okay.
expensive.
They are also having a tech layoff scenario.
Yeah, but it's independent of shifts and stuff.
Right.
35,000 places where 1 to 2 to 3 people can live. And Bozeman has close to 2,000 home apartments right now. And the issue for me is that they're expensive. You know, and I think the median value that we use for affordability is, oh, I do have one more, is off. And so, you know, it's not cookie cutter. So we use the same cookie cutter promises. It doesn't work because it's going to change what we really want to keep.
Right.
Another concern is, no, I just forgot.
Well, what was that? How do I write down that last one?
They're familiar with it?
Yeah. No, I'm joking. What was it? Like, just,
Yeah, why do we have to increase density everywhere?
Oh,
We
okay.
don't
I
have to
did write
increase
that
density
down.
everywhere. We can be more thoughtful and strategic and look at things that are already working and protect them. Because this density, I mean, we do this every 5 years, but in 20 years, think of what this is going to do. If we can just be more strategic and thoughtful and not have to do this everywhere, in 20 years, Bozeman's going to be still a full place because there's going to be places where people that are very desirable. Not like desirable for the wealthy people who are coming. We already have that. A plumber had to come to my house the other day and he said he read a statistic where 80% of people who have moved to Bozeman in the last 3 years don't have to work.
I would believe that.
Yeah, so if you've been
And we're super working class. in
Yeah,
this neighborhood.
our neighborhood is working class, so if you don't have to work when you move here, you're in a completely different financial situation than people who are barely making ends meet month to month, so.
Okay.
I just really like the city people to consider that.
So something that other cities are doing. There's cookies. Something that other cities are doing is having different zoning districts for like established neighborhoods, and then you know the ideas of the new UDC, like the minimum shrinking the lot sizes and things like that, can work really super great. We can do amazing things like the Bridgerview development. Are you guys familiar with that? Nice, compact, well-designed little neighborhood. They had like 19 or 17 departures from code to make that happen. So if we can make that the norm in Greenfield, great.
That was a trailer park, though, wasn't it?
I know.
It wasn't
That's a whole
Greenfield,
other story.
it was a redevelopment, but.
That was a crooked.
Yeah, sorry. That was a trailer park.
That's Bozeman
so
history.
It was not Greenfield, it was development.
No, well, I think where the trailers were is actually the park. Anyway, so something other cities are doing is having these historic zoning districts, but retiring them. So keeping them in place for existing neighborhoods, and then, you know, make these new regulations so that it's easier to do small starter homes in new areas that we annex. So that is how I broke down the zoning. All right, yes.
With our proximity to the university and the proposed increase units, size of units, capacity of units, and just moving into a more building, have a little residential.
Oh, yes,
For neighborhood
yes.
character, the potential and permitting for sororities and fraternities.
Yes.
That's-
So we could
that's-
have sororities and fraternities locate in our neighborhood.
It wouldn't fit in our small houses though.
Well, no, and that's the problem that the university neighborhood ran into, right? So 4 guys rented a house together. We're used to that. That's our whole neighborhood. Okay, sometimes they have parties, not generally a problem. If there's a fraternity going in there, they have meetings multiple times a month, they have
There are 100
parties.
members.
They have, yeah, 50 members come and show up, and it's a big, you know, and technically maybe you're supposed to get a license for events, but they don't. So, yeah, fraternity and sorority regulations are a problem, that's true. Good call, Dylan. Yes. Anything else, anybody? We can move on to question 3 because this is the part I'm really excited about to talk about. We are not making any decisions about the neighborhood tonight. What we're doing is talking about ideas and possibilities and what we think could be good. So, you know, when you start talking about potential historic regulations, some people freak out, okay? Like, we're gonna regulate your property to death. And there was a really good saying in one of the historic preservation presentations. Preservation is how we manage change, it's not how we prevent change, right? So we're not putting anything under glass, we're not freezing it in time. But maybe there's a few tools that we could use going forward that could address these concerns. Yeah.
Don't, the incentives, the shallow and the deep incentives need a complete rework. I think we need to get more from developers when we give them so much. Giving away parking, giving away all the things that are in the shallow incentives. But that needs to be overhauled.
Are the rest of you familiar with the proposed affordable housing ordinance?
Well, you kind of brought that up over here
Yeah.
about the tall ones.
It's in the building heights there. So, the commission is meeting about that on Tuesday, so. I can send you out a link to the draft and, I think I've sent it out a few times before. But anyway, yeah. Okay, so, neighborhood level planning, I guess, you know, a lot of the things that are concerning for us are because of how our neighborhood is right now, right? So neighborhood level planning can take a lot of different forms. It can be simple zoning things, it can be landmark designation, landmark district, you know, and that can be individual buildings or it can be districts. So, and then down zoning is maybe a way to, you know, address some of the concerns in your R3 area. It's hard. So, I'm not saying don't try, but like, you know, the city doesn't like to do it because they can get sued. So, and then conservation overlays is another thing. And I'm glad we have someone here who lives in the NCOD, Trish, and you've actually done, you added an ADU. And so you went through the COA review for the NCOD and
Yeah, which was good. I mean, it was,
you felt like it was okay?
I thought, I mean, there were things, of course, but
Yeah.
overall it was, the city was making sure everything was going to go well.
Good. Okay. Yeah, so, you know.
Other than impact fees and building permits.
I know, right?
That was crazy.
Right?
But, you know, dealing with the cities, and we try to keep it small, keep it.
Because you guys probably worked with Sarah. Maybe? Yeah, because Sarah does every COA that comes across the cities, which is a ton.
It took a while, but, so it's been.
So yeah, do you want to say anything about like any of those neighborhood level planning, landmark districts, NCOD, any of the things?
Can you come over here, because there's a big fan going on?
We'll just give kind of a background, whatever program, how it exists. Because as I was just reading other these things, it's that being talked about tonight are very zoning specific. We also have a historic preservation program. This program's been around since 1991, and what it does is it encompasses the neighborhood conservation overlay district, which was set as an overlay zoning district on a boundary that pretty much goes from 11th to Northeast neighborhood over to down like northeast, pretty much following the direction of like old rail line all the way down to like MSU. And more or less what that means is that there's just an additional level of planning review that's called a certificate of appropriateness, and how it has to adhere to both a section of code, which is within the UDC, but is not part of the overall rewrite in this discussion, as well as under some design guidelines. The program, the conservation, if you want to say, the NCOD overlay, it is enforceable because it is a zoning district. However, the code section of that part, and if you ever just look at, I mean, if you have gone through a COA process, it has its own section of regulations. And what those regulations, that's being reworked in a different project, which is called the Landmark and Historic Preservation Policy. And that is, although they're very interlinked in some way per se with the UDC, but as the UDC and as other codes have evolved over the last 30 plus years, there have only been minimal changes to the NCOD and that section of code that haven't been met and haven't been able to be, that are adhered to a little bit different because there is more either scrutiny or detail in the rest of code versus the sub versus the NCOD. So what that program is again, it is not to restrict development. That is a huge misnomer around the world of preservation. And how that was what it kind of was maybe like 30 or 40 years ago, but we have not, I think the world of preservation has had a lot of backpedaling to do to move forward, seeing how can preservation be more aligned with ways to recognize what does exist, but also accommodate for what needs to change. And so this neighborhood, that Jandt Neighborhood, is outside of the NCOD, so it does not fall on, or maybe there's that just one sliver. It is, so it's outside of that, so pretty much more or less you can just go through like the building permit process, right? You don't have to do an additional planning application. When you, this program that the project we're working on right now, which is running concurrently, and also you can find out all of this stuff on the Engage Bozeman page, is to look at how preservation is not just about the built environment, but also about what we call some intangible heritage. But there is still a component of it that is recognizing how there are themes out there, how there are characteristics out there, how there are levels of significance out there that might not be how we deal with the program now, which is what falls more under national standards, that we can create our own kind of local standards. But these local standards, we don't have them yet because we are in the process of working on them. There was a lot of engagement from spring until fall where we were out and about and had a survey, and maybe some of you have been part of that.
How many of you filled out the historic survey?
Great, that's awesome, thank you. And so we're in the process of working on that report right now, but I just want to emphasize that it's like, yes, we don't know what that, there are a lot of other municipalities out there that have local programs, and it's because they can set up their own criteria and nomination process. But what the key thing in that is that it is not as going to be restricting growth, it is more just need to recognize almost a cohesiveness based on whether it's a settlement pattern or a group of people from like history or architectural significance. I mean, it can even go as far as like landscapes and things like that, which is not always stuff that is, it just doesn't have, so that level of criteria can be set by the community. And so that is going to be looking at city-wide versus versus what how the program is only really looked at what is encompassed as kind of what we call as the core of original town sections. But this is the conversation of like some of the things about neighborhood planning. The tool of this landmark, there's a lot of different routes that you can be doing through, whether it's like how it exists right now, is that there are zone map amendments, there are zone text amendments to changing how boundaries lie, but that's going to be more about like the form and intensity standards, the setbacks, the things that Allison was talking about before. While the landmark component of it is not about that. It is more about just the cohesiveness of, and it can have design guidelines, but it's a cohesiveness of more just a theme to that place, not necessarily just because it has to follow a certain criteria. We have not established that criteria, but it will eventually be like some sort of tool to recognize, but depending on how, what the neighborhoods are desiring to do, will depend on different parts of it.
So say if there's like a mid-century modern area that we wanted to do a landmark district, what kind of things would that, like, is that up to the neighborhoods to?
It's all voluntary.
Yeah.
So similar to like a zone map amendment, unless it's like a city little thing like that we're doing as like a big effort in the EDC and how zone districts can change. Landmark status. I mean, right now, currently, you can go for like National Register status and follow those kind of components. But, so that's always existed. Zoning districts, changing that, that's always existed. This is just another level that we have recognized where not always at the national level depicts what is significant to a community. But it would be volunteer, like everything, it's a property owner driven, volunteer driven.
So like right now.
But we do not have that process, that's the local one, we do not have. We
Right.
can still go through the national standard one, but we do not have, that is what we're working on, which is called the local landmark program.
Build on that, as Sarah's mentioned, it's popular. So we occasionally bump into folks who think, oh, it's a landmark building, it can't be modified, it's X, Y, and Z. If you look at the state department who manages this program for the state, they've got a little disclaimer on their website saying, this is a good hearty pat on the back on a plaque. It does not change anything else about your ability to use the property. So one of the things we work with all the time is we have to keep what we do inside the framework that's set by the state. And so that's in lots of different forms depending on the subject, but landmarks, that's certainly part of what Sarah's working on, and all that good stuff.
Okay, so the current program, that is like the National Register, those things, that's honorary. That doesn't actually have regulations on the property. So you can tear down the National Register building. Yes. If we were to create a landmark district, would that allow us to create an ordinance that would regulate that?
Demolition,
Or anything?
that's more, I would say zoning.
Okay. So the
And we'll
landmark.
have demolition ordinances, but it's not here to just completely, like, say that you can't do it, you can't.
Okay.
That's a lot, that's takings, lawsuits, a lot of things like that. So as it stands, it's just a recognition to show that it's like that there is a historically significant structure that emulates enough of the heritage and cultural significance of Bozeman, right? That's at kind of at like a very high level. Well, we pushed this project initially is just because it's like there has been more of a call to action that national standards don't always reflect local community goals. We see that with just pretty much anything. And so the hope would be that, yes, there could be and because of the fact that we have our program, our historic preservation program, which only encompasses a set boundary that has been around for the past 30 years, we don't have that recognition of other places outside of your all's property, right? And so it's not there to be said that, like, again, not to freeze in time, not to allow for no changes, just to have another level of recognition to maybe then grant incentive or relief from certain standard. I mean, there's a plethora of different benefits that can come from it because I don't have like those early items for some midst of it. I'm not really saying that like we don't really know what it's going to look like until it works its way through and then eventually is adopted by the city commission. But in other places, it is through ways of like, rehab grant assistance, departure relief to make it so that it's like if you're keeping a certain building when you are a certain way, you can do X, Y, and Z, something else. Like there's a wide variety, and then also to just like recognize further some of these important places that make up the fabric of our community. We're not here to say that that's everywhere, but outside of our core of this boundary, there is more to it. To our place, especially as it comes to, we don't have a lot of, actually the next level that I was talking about is just that a big part of historic preservation is surveying properties so that you just can have documentation to know about like the history of the property, photo documentation of it, just general things like that. And that oftentimes it moves towards, that's to move towards like national register, but also documentation of places is also just like very important, or very, important, but then also beneficial for that, like if you're trying to learn more about certain neighborhoods or certain places where people, and a variety of different categories that can be of interest of different folks and other people different showed up yesterday and so
if we make landmark districts, it doesn't necessarily have regulations to protect the character of that place.
There can be design components to it, but not necessarily like,
Okay.
That's the interface between zoning and historic preservation.
Okay.
The regulatory side is zoning.
Okay.
We think this is great for all of those reasons. Here's why it's important for the community. All of the district stuff is just as well. That's the historic preservation.
okay. But it's weird because it's like conservation overlay districts can be used for, that's another reason why we're looking at the preservation programs, just because as the boundary has been and how it was 30 years ago is very different than how it is nowadays, and it has not kept up with how we, our design guidelines are really outdated, the code section has a lot to be worked with, and that is a tool where there's overlay districts. That's a tool that exists today. It's not that is a zone, technically a zone element as an overlay district. That's something that exists today. It's just that there's a lot of conflicts with how the NCOD has maintained and not kept up with like certain components of it that have brought on further conflicts with zoning districts with other standards and that's another thing to try to kind of clean this up so that we have ways to, it's a delicate balance because of the fact that it's like, because like zoning can be preservation, and can have preservation components, but the way that we're talking about, or how you're talking about it here, I'm hearing more about just like specific zone district rather than like,
That's awesome clarification for us.
One of the things that's really important is the framework we understand.
Yeah.
The legal framework we work in from a zoning standpoint, lots and lots of regulations, regulations. If something that's honorary, voluntary, lots of latitude, lots of ways to work with landowners. The legislature doesn't seem to mind that.
Okay, well, because it's honorary.
It's
Yeah.
from the regulatory side, there's bills every single session that adjust the rules. 2 years later, we do it.
Right. So something I'm really curious about is demolition. What are we allowed to do by state law and what are we not allowed to do? Because I'm really averse to waste and our homes are in good condition. They can be renovated very easily and they have really good bones, dimensional lumber, good foundations, you know. So is there any, you know, I think everybody here has worked on their home and we want to still be able to work on their home, right? So we don't want some super strict regulations, but what about preventing demolition? Like, what does that landscape even look like?
It's fraught with landmines.
Okay.
One of the things we have to do anytime we're doing regulations is we have to be able to articulate what's the public purpose, why are we doing it, how are we doing it, are we doing it in an appropriate way? And when you're saying you have a building, you have this range of activities that the law allows you to do, and you want to change from A to B. Property rights, I've heard that before. So that insertion into the restriction on that has a lot of very careful thought that's needed. If you're talking about taking down a building that's halfway down yesterday, very different situation than you got a building, I want a different building.
Right, so as a municipality, we could potentially have the ability to say, you know, there's guardrails around demolition, or we can say no to demolition unless it's like unsafe or something.
Very, very hard. That's a legal determination, but it's allowed in the law.
And
It's
state law
allowed.
or local law? Okay, like, yeah, I guess I'm asking, could we make a local law? And I'm interested in it citywide for deconstruction to salvage usable building materials, but also for our neighborhood, like, that housing is habitable and useful, and so is that.
Interesting question. I'm not aware of anything in state law that authorizes the city to do with the construction ordinance. That doesn't mean it doesn't exist. State law is not this law.
Yeah. Is there any-
My arms stretch quite far enough.
my understanding is that deconstruction ordinances can exist. But there's 2 municipalities that they don't have, that they have a place to be able to salvage materials, and that's Butte and Missoula. And, but neither of them, they just, I've talked to a lot of different municipalities who have had ordinances, and the main thing that I have heard about from them is whether, so San Antonio, Texas has like one of the most robust preservation programs, deconstruction, sustainability. They're pretty top of the line on some of their program efforts. They have a deconstruction ordinance where then they have partnered with an organization to help with actually managing the materials, all sorts of things like that. There's a lot of other municipalities where that doesn't exist, and it's all private. Then the city enforces the deconstruction component, but then there's the private side of it is where the materials go, because there were ways that the city tried to manage it, but it was way too much because they needed like 10 more, they needed staff with technical expertise, the understanding of what it means to go through and actually look at materials and understand that it can be deconstructed. So it is a program or it's a tool that's out there in many municipalities, and it has been enforced, but it appears hard to manage without more staff. So I think it's awesome. It's just, there's a lot, it's just, and legality is questionable.
Again, it goes back to that question of, are we supporting a voluntary program, or we have partners and we do a lot of good things that people can opt in, or are we trying to say, shop every time?
You'd actually be surprised how many people actually do deconstruct
Nice.
around here without us.
Yeah, Rob at CSI doesn't let his workers throw away a piece of wood that's 4 feet long, so. Okay, and, some other questions? Genius? So it's sounding a little bit like preventing demolition is really difficult, and maybe zoning.
Tell people what to do.
Right, well, yeah, the idea is if you pay a contractor to tear down a house, you're not gonna tear it down. But,
Okay, I guess, so the upzoning seems, I don't want to say easy, but upzoning seems to happen.
no, it is easy.
It's easy, and downzoning is impossible because you're taking away people's property rights.
The legal process is the same. The criteria we evaluate is the same, whether we bring up or down. The difference is you have somebody who, whether they perceive something as getting more or losing something, will react very differently to those two.
So if a person like me was going to try to take the R3 in Jandt Neighborhood and figure out how to downzone it, what are the criteria to get it downzoned? That makes sense.
There are 11 criteria the state has set for any zoning change, whether that's text or map. It starts with growth policy, so that's the community document that says here's our aspirations. You have to look at infrastructure, you have to look at transportation, you have to look at a whole raft of different subjects. And then if you're wanting to propose a rezone on property that you don't own, then you need at least 51% of people to say, hey, we're opting into this process. You don't have to have 100%. You can have at least the majority of the people volunteering to go through that process.
Does it would have to be the landowner, not the tenant?
Correct.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, someone told me it has to be the bank that owns the land, is that?
Different law.
Okay.
So in subdivision, if you're going to divide a property and record a plat to make the lots, you make it banks essentially. We do not have that same requirement for zoning.
So this is just the steps to present it to the city. I mean, who decides?
Ultimately, the city commission decides on any zoning change for text or amendment. They have to do that by ordinance. That's a state law requirement, and there's a whole series of state law about how to do the cases.
Information on that whole process.
I did see that.
So,
in the-
yeah, yeah. And there's a couple neighborhoods working on it right now.
It won't be that hard.
So, yeah, I mean, I guess there's also the question of, like, the NCOD boundary. That is something that could change in the landmark program too, right? I mean, it's not looking